Every single week, we have a conversation about 4 ways that you can grow in your spiritual journey. And they are actually our 4 core values of our church as well. Learning and community worship, learning and living God's word, service and outreach, which is loving our community and world. And today, we're focusing on outreach, not just what you can do in outreach, but why do we have outreach? Why are we here? And so, Pastor Gene, talk to us a little bit about Colfax. So we have a ministry every single week that we have at an elementary school where we serve a hot breakfast, and we do ministry down there and reach kids who are unreached, maybe homeless or at-risk children. Talk to us, how did this begin to start? What was the birthing of Highpoint at Colfax?
You know, it started it was right around 2009, and I started walking the streets of our city. So for all those years I was here, already seven and a half years, I was consumed with the church. And, pastoring today can be there's lots of demands people have. We want this ministry, we want that. And I was kept so busy here, Caleb, that I really wasn't seeking God's will for our city. And so Ron and I started walking the streets of Colfax. And we came in contact with parts of our city where we started, 85 years ago, this church started, that now is an urban corridor that has crime and prostitution and gang violence. And we started walking the streets and talking to people down there. And God just began to stir our hearts that there were needs in the city that we as a church were not reaching, and that we were feeding ourselves. The image I had in my mind was, this church of spiritually obese people that are constantly at the smorgasbord, taking, but never giving out. Wow. And that's how the burden started down there, walking the streets, and then God led us through several other steps.
So what were those first few steps that you guys took in the process? You felt this burden, but what did that begin to look like as you began to feel that?
Well, at first I went to the board and I shared with them the burden. I was afraid they were going to think I was crazy because God was speaking to me about, going back to the urban corridor that we left, and here we were trying to build this building, but they were the exact opposite. They were like, man, Pastor, let's keep praying about this. And so what we did is we took the first steps and we rented at MLK. I started every Thursday working all day at MLK Library down in the hood, and volunteering in the church. All they did was schedule appointments for me all day. Anyone that would talk with me, school teachers, city council members, state legislators, anyone that was familiar with that area. And so for a whole year on Thursdays, I was at the coffee shop at MLK just talking to people about what the community needs. And then we rented an empty place that was across the street. It was a storefront that I noticed had been empty for several months. So the church rented it for 60 days. And we asked all of our people here to go and pray every night in the prayer room. And we had a big list of things to pray. It was a big focus. I'm just curious, how many of you here were part of that team that was in the prayer room down on Colfax? If you're here, wow, clap your hands so we can at least hear where you're at.
Few of you.
So yeah. And man, Caleb, we just started praying for other ministries that were down there. And we started realizing that the church had left the most needy part of our city, not just our church, all churches, and anything that was left down there was so small and so struggling they couldn't make an impact.
Wow.
And so that prayer room on Colfax, we covered the windows, and every night there was probably 15 to 20 people down there for 60 days praying.
So how did God begin to answer those prayers? Because you have all these people praying. What was like a defining moment for you?
We started, for that year, we served everybody else. We sent volunteers to other organizations. And we just said, God, what are you speaking to us? And it was during that time that in that prayer room, I had come in contact with an organization that does demographic research called the Pizzon Foundation. And when they heard that I was down there praying, this is a non-believing organization, they shared all their research with us. And we discovered that all the way across Highway 70 was the largest population of children in poverty in the entire state. About 2 miles north, about 3 miles south of Colfax, all the way across 5 cities. But Aurora had the worst. We had the highest population of kids in poverty. And the Lord started speaking to me about reaching children down in that area. Now here's what is amazing about this. How many of you know sometimes God speaks to you, but then he gives you these miraculous, unexplainable coincidences that just tell you you're on the right track? Have any of you had those before? Some of you like, yes, the Lord told me to get a big screen TV for the Broncos. Well, so we're down there in this prayer room, and God speaks to me about starting a church for children.
Wow.
And so a few months later, there is an announcement at the Aurora History Museum. I love history. People think I'm a nerd. How many history nerds are here? Come on, how many? Yeah, there they are. There's God's people right there. And so I went to the Aurora History Museum. They're having a focus on Colfax, longest street in America. It is called the wickedest, evilest street in America. Colfax Avenue runs all the way from Aurora all the way to the mountains. And I'm walking through, and there is a picture that just grabs my spirit. I cannot explain to you what happened when I looked at this picture. And you guys have it up there on the screen. So this is in Aurora, and this is, 1950s, when this part of town was like, Leave It to Cleaver type of neighborhood. And there's these kids in their Sunday school, and they're running in to this drugstore, and there's a sign in the bottom left-hand corner. Those of you can see it, clap your hands if you can see the sign. And the sign says that free ice cream if you've been to Sunday school. And I don't know what burned in my spirit, Caleb. I could not get away from that sign. I'm like, man, why would a business owner be wanting to encourage kids to go to Sunday school? So I started digging, going to the records in the city, trying to find out who the store was. Well, it turns out there might be some old Aurora people, some old timers here. How many of you remember the Rex All Drugstore on Colfax? Gary is the only one. Gary is the only one. And Gary was actually one of the guys that pointed me in the direction. So this was owned by a Christian gentleman who had a burden for kids to be discipled. Now, I started finding out about him in the store, and what is amazing about the story is when I found that company in the records, it was the same address as the prayer room that we had been praying in for 60 days.
Isn't that amazing?
It was like, there was a prophetic call to reach children. And this man's prayer, this businessman, listen, if you're here today and you're wondering if God hears your prayers, I mean, this picture was sometime in the early 50s. And here, all these years later, the Holy Spirit is still answering that man's prayer.
Wow.
And Highpoint at Colfax was birthed in that prayer room.
Wow.
And today, last week, Eva had, 90-something, 80, low 90s, 80s down there, reaching kids that no one is reaching. And this changed our whole outreach for the church.
Yeah. How has this impacted Highpoint's mission as a whole? Like, how has it shaped the mission?
It spoke to me that I need to listen to God's Spirit because He wants to reach the city. We're not here by accident.
Yeah.
We're not here. You're not here because your job brought you here. You're not here because you just happened to be raised here. You're here because God has a purpose for the city. And we started having this approach about outreach here in this area, everywhere. God, where's a need that we can fill?
Yeah.
And so everything from Colfax to the unique things we do to reach families in this area with needs are based on the things that we learned in that prayer room.
That's so amazing. In just a few weeks, we're going to be hosting an outreach for kids here at Highpoint Church. And man, we are so excited. It's called Kids Blitz.
Yeah.
And it's going to be coming up in just a few minutes. We're going to show you a little promo video about it. If you haven't signed up yet, I would encourage you to do that. You can find out information in the bulletin or at info today. But I know that some people are like, how in the world does a church sustain itself on Colfax and that reaches kids? In all actuality, it doesn't. It's financed by the people here at Highpoint Church, and it's done through our outreach program. And every single time we talk about outreach, we bring out these little cards and we talk about how we can reach the world together. And on the back of this, it lists all of our missions partners, outreach partners on here. And there are a lot of places on here that say undercover partner. Why would in the world does it say undercover partner? It's because we have partners, outreach partners all over the world who are in sensitive areas.
Yeah.
If their information was shared, it could put them in danger. And so we share this
not
every
only
week.
overseas, the way our church is structured, people's tithing pays for the ministry that happens inside these walls.
Yeah.
anything outside of these walls, even if it's Kids Blitz, even if it's, a couple months ago, Aurora Mental Health has a counseling center down here. And we sent babysitters down there to watch kids while single moms were getting the counseling that they needed. This kind of stuff is financed by missions, by outreach.
By outreach.
All over the world and in our own
locally.
city.
And so if you're wondering how you can be part of this, you can fill this out, and it says a monthly pledge amount. Basically what we ask people to do is pray and consider what you would give towards reaching our world and loving our community locally, nationally, internationally. Man, together we're making a difference. So if you'd like to be part of that, you can fill this out and drop it in the offering plate this morning. And man, I'm excited about this outreach that's coming up over the next few weeks. How many of you guys love that we can reach every generation? I love the fact that we are a multi-generational church, and that together we get to reach people who are far from God, and we get to make a difference in people's lives. So this morning, as